Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Hope everybody has a great day today. We have a lot to cover. So much stuff to cover, not a lot of time to get through it. A wild weekend. We'll cover everything that happened in another incredible Super Wild Card weekend. 4 blowouts, 1 amazing game, and a game tonight. The Vikings take on the Rams in the final game of the NFL Wild Card round. We'll talk about that and much more coming up in just a second. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, January 13th. But like I was saying, we're going to get into our first topic of the show today. That is the game that takes place tonight between the Vikings and the Rams. This is a game that took place earlier this season, yet another rematch in what has seemingly been the theme of Wild Card Weekend, rematch after rematch after rematch, especially on the NFC side of the ball. The Vikings come into this game at 14-3, and they have lost crucially to just 2 teams all season long. Of course, 2 of them are to the number 1 overall seed in the NFL. The Detroit Lions. The other one, kind of gave it away there, I guess, was those Los Angeles Rams. They have another game tonight, right? This game, last time they played in Week 8, was on Thursday Night Football, which is something that I think needs to be taken into account here, because Thursday Night Football is crucially different than any other kind of football, and we see it a lot of the times. Those teams are a little bit sloppy. They don't have the most crazy play calls done. This was a Thursday Night Football game. You don't have a full install. The Vikings and the Rams played. It was 30-20. We saw the Rams win this game. This was the second loss of the season, the second loss in a row handed to the Minnesota Vikings. But this game has a little bit different context, right? And there's different context for both of them. This was the first game when they played each other early on in the season where the Rams were really fully healthy, and it showed. You had a huge, huge game from Puka Nacua, who went out there and did his thing. You also had a great game from Justin Jefferson, and I think the game scripts are going to be very similar. We talk about 2 defenses that are really dominant, but both of these teams found ways around it. The pass rush for the Rams especially, it needs to get home if the Rams want any chance of winning this game. The Rams are a team that is built a little differently. Their biggest weakness is, of course, that secondary. So this is the secondary, right? They can keep up with anybody offensively with their weapons, but the secondary is not great. And when you go up against a team filled with weapons like the Vikings, you're prone for a potential shootout, which the Rams have found themselves in a good amount of times this season. They have some of the highest scoring games on the year. Of course, that game where they lost to the Bills were able to keep it close. The Vikings can do something similar, but it's all going to fall on the shoulders of one man, that being Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold, of course, just had probably his worst game of the season. That happened in Week 18 against the Lions, and what was a pseudo playoff game for them, right? Win and you get a bye, lose and you play on the road in Los Angeles. Now, this game has been moved to Glendale, Arizona, of course, because of the wildfires going on. But still, you go on the road and play as a 14-3 team, which is brutal. It's not what you want. It's not something that you expect, but it's a fact of life, right? This would be, if the Rams are able to pull this off, the third upset, I guess you could call it. There were only one seeding upset. There were 2 upsets that took place on Saturday and Sunday. Potentially, we see a third in this one, but really, this game, in my opinion, is going to come down to the play of Sam Darnold. Is he going to regress to what we saw him do on Sunday Night Football last time? Is he going to keep overthrowing guys, missing wide open reads in the flat, especially in the red zone? And how much of that Lions defense can the Rams duplicate, right? Because what what the Lions were able to do against guys like Justin Jefferson and a resurgent recently, of course, Jordan Addison was amazing. They were able to shut them down. They were able to shut down the run game as well. And then you just had an ineffective Sam Darnold who kept sailing balls, which you can't do against this Rams team because their secondary, well, it's not the best. There's no doubt about it. It is incredibly opportunistic. So if you give them the chance to go and pick you off, they're going to capitalize on it. And when you have an offense like the Rams do with Kyron Williams, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, and all of the weapons up and down the lineup that they have, it is never going to be an easy day for a quarterback like a Sam Darnold. At the end of the day, I think that's what it's going to come down to. Which quarterback plays better? And that's kind of what's come down to in a lot of these playoff games so far, right? Not in every single one, but a general rule of thumb, I think for 5 out of these 6 games is if you have the better quarterback, you're going to win. Or 4 out of these 5 so far. If you have the better quarterback, you're going to win. And arguably 5 out of those 5. But I digress. If you have the better quarterback, you're going to win. And right now, as good as Sam Darnold has been this season, I just think Matthew Stafford is a better quarterback. What he's able to do, even at his age, is incredible, and I think he needs to get a lot more love for what he can do this season. I'm taking the Rams to upset the Vikings in a neutral site. I think they win 24-20. But let me know what you think. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention to the best game of the weekend. There was one game that was close, 4 games that were not. We're going to talk about the close game, the Commanders versus Bucs, coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't need shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over the Rams versus Vikings game that is taking place as we speak. In this segment, we turn our attention to what was the best game of the wild card weekend, that being the Commanders taking on the Bucs. We'll talk about everything that happened in that game and what the future holds for both of these teams in just a second. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, January 13th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the Commanders versus the Buccaneers. This was by far the best game of the weekend. There is no doubt about it. You can't say anything otherwise. This is the only one that was even close. All the other ones were blowouts, and this one, did not fail to entertain. At the end of the game, we had drama. We had a crazy play made by some crazy athletes and a doink field goal at the end. We had rivalry. It was a game that really had everything. And I want to key in on that rivalry part first, right? Because one of the big sellers of this game was going to be the battle between Marshawn Lattimore, former corner from the Saints who was traded to the Commanders at the trade deadline, and star wide receiver for the Buccaneers, Mike Evans. Those two go at it a lot, and they were going to be put on an island in a playoff game for the first time in their careers against each other. In general, Mike Evans has lost those battles, held to about 4 for 55 when they match up against each other. But this time was different. We saw a Mike Evans go out there and destroy Marshawn Lattimore so much that they had to take him off the island and play some help coverage to his side. They had to take him away from that one-on-one matchup, and I'm sure that sucks for Marshawn Lattimore. But what Mike Evans was able to do in this game was crazy. His touchdown catch was one of the most insane throws that I have seen, right? It goes through, he first of all, he completely shakes off Lattimore one-on-one, one best versus best in that situation. Baker Mayfield's throw, great defense by the safety number 20 to realize it, goes right through his arms, through his head, and right into Mike Evans' hands. That was a beautiful throw, a beautiful catch. A little bit of luck, of course, involved in anything successful that you do on an NFL field, but that was a beautiful play. Outside of that, this game felt like the defense didn't want to defend the middle of the in between the 20s, right? These teams kept going up and down the field against each other. The Commanders especially had a lot of ball, had the offense on the field a lot of the time. They were able to move up and down the field pretty much without any kind of resistance. And it's something that I think it really showed when you're going back and watching these games. Now, this game ended up going down to that game-winning field goal. But if they hadn't gone for it on fourth down a couple times, taken the points when they were in the red zone, this game looks like a 9-point game instead. Now, I'm not blaming them. I agreed with the calls at the time. Obviously, I have no issues with it because it worked. We can go back and criticize in a different world where it didn't work and they end up losing. But Washington, D.C. gets a playoff win for the first time since 2005 against those Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? And it's led by a rookie quarterback in Jaden Daniels, who has completely changed the way that this team, this city, and the way that it looks at football, right? Because this, for a very long time, was just a black hole for football fans, right? There was nothing good going on, nothing exciting. They made the playoffs every once in a while, but they had only won one game in the playoffs they only won one game since 2000 in the playoffs, and that was in 2005. Was very bleak, not a lot to look forward to, but Jaden Daniels comes in and he does something special. What he's able to do for this team, not just with his arm, right? Because what he does with his arm is incredible, but something with stuff with his legs as well. And one of these plays that I thought that really stuck out to me at the game during this game down the stretch was the game-sealing first down run that Jaden Daniels had, right? He does stuff like this all the time. He's incredibly elusive, but Kalijah Kancey, who's really come on strong this season as an incredible defender, gets in his face quickly. He is able to do everything he can to avoid Kalijah Kancey. Kalijah Kancey ends up stealing the towel that's attached to his hip at that point, but Jaden Daniels escapes and picks up the first down to ice the game. Instead of giving the ball back to the Bucs, he is able to avoid one of the best defenders on that team, someone that's been causing a lot of trouble for that offensive line, was able to slice through quickly. And when I thought he was dead to rights, he goes out there and he completely changes the narrative of this game. That was an incredible play by a guy in Jaden Daniels who has just made plays like that all season, especially down the stretch in these 2-minute warning situations, right? A huge play by the defense, able to jump on the ball to get this game tied at all, right? When Baker Mayfield mishandles a handoff, miscommunication with Jalen McMillan, ball goes on the ground, the Commanders take over. Game is tied. If that doesn't happen, you don't even get this situation. But then you give the ball back to Jaden Daniels, tie game, and he goes out there and he just does exactly what you need him to do. In a 2-minute drill, what he's able to do is incredible. In a 2-minute drill, it's a lot on the quarterback more than the coaches, right? Because you don't have time to get those long play calls. You get a couple called in the first huddle, you get a couple called if the ball ever falls incomplete, if you go out of bounds, but you have a general idea and you have a lot of control of the field. What he's able to do with his eyes, with his legs especially, and with his arm, moving the Commanders down the field, making smart decisions, crucially, 12 touchdowns in clutch time situations. That's less than 2 minutes to go in the fourth quarter and overtime, right? He has continuously led this team to big time wins all season long. And this is a new kind of football situation in Washington that we have just not had in a very long time. It is incredibly impressive to see, and it's one of those things that you can make the argument that Jayden Daniels, already a top 10 quarterback in this league, going to potentially be a top 5 quarterback in this league after next season, or at least at some point next season. I think he has the ability to do that. But you look at his game, and it's going to keep evolving, right? They've kind of been safe with him all season. They've let him take some shots to Terry McLaurin down the sideline, who, by the way, one of the best contested ball catchers in all of the NFL. The way he's able to track them, get his hands on the ball, and when he gets his hands on the ball, he does not let go of that thing. It's incredibly impressive. What he's able to do with his weapons outside of Terry, Olamide Zaccheaus has had a good season, right? Noah Brown caught a touchdown, had a huge game for the Commanders. Austin Eckler is having a little bit of a career revival for the Commanders in this one. They've done an incredible job with this team. They've done an incredible job on short notice. It's not something that really I expected them to be, at least yet this season, but Jayden Daniels has defied all expectations, and I think Washington is going to be that next juggernaut in the NFC, right? We have the Chiefs in the AFC, and, generally there's only space for one dynasty, and I'm not saying that Jayden Daniels is going to be Patrick Mahomes level good. I'm not saying that Jayden Daniels and the Commanders are going to be making the Super Bowl every year, but there is a curse. No one has repeated the NFC East since 2003, 2004. And I think the Commanders are about to run away with this division for a very, very long time because Jayden Daniels is special. What he's able to do on the football field is special, and he's going to be an elite quarterback sooner rather than later if you don't already think he is. But let me know what you think of this game. The Commanders escape with a victory 23-20. They take on another team that's kind of been stuck in the doldrums for a very long time in the Lions in the next round. That one should be very interesting. I think those two teams, very similar. Strong offense, not very good defense. We'll see what's going on. But yeah, let me know what you think. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, there were 4 losers. And those 4 losers that got blown out, I have one big question surrounding all of them. We're going to go through the list there in chronological order of when they played. We'll talk about that and more coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, January 13th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over the best game that took place, the Sunday night football game between the Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield and the Commanders and Jayden Daniels. In this segment, we turn our attention to the 4 big losers. 4 teams played outside of those 4 teams lost, 4 teams got blown out. I've got one big question for each one of those, and we're going to go through and answer each one of those questions coming up in just a second. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, January 13th. But like I was saying, we're going to get into the 4 big questions that I have for the teams that had 4 big blowout losses. And we're going to start off with the team that played first, and that is the Justin Herbert-led Chargers, right? They get absolutely destroyed in this one, lose by 20 points. And the question for this one is surrounding Justin Herbert and the quarterback play. Is he the answer over there? Is it time to move on from a guy like Justin Herbert? There's been rumblings for a very long time around the Chargers organizations, from fans, from media, that talk about is Justin Herbert going to be the answer, a long-term solution? For my money, yes. Yes, he is. He is amazing. He is a top 10 quarterback. He is a guy that I think is the 5th best quarterback in the NFL. Now, you can feel free to disagree with me on that one. That's completely fine. I understand. But to go as far as to say this was completely on him, this loss was completely on him, and that's the move they need to make to get better, I think that's ridiculous, right? How can Justin Herbert help this team? You've seen it in the regular season. This was a Chargers team that was not expected to be in the playoffs. They were not expected to be the 5 seed in the playoffs. They were not expected to win 12 games this year. They went out there and they won 12 games. A lot of that due to coaching, due to good play calling, a lot of that due to Justin Herbert. His ability to play without weapons. For context here, Justin Herbert threw 4 interceptions in this game. Bad. No other way around it. He threw 3 interceptions all season long. He threw more interceptions in this one game than he did in 17 prior. And you can say, oh, that's playoff choking, right? Not all of these interceptions were completely on him. A couple of them were on him, but one thing that I really want to point to in this game, and one thing that I think needs to get pointed out a little bit more, is the fact that J.K. Dobbins, their lead rusher, the guy that they've leaned on for a lot of success, especially early on in the season, had less than 10 carries at the end of this game. This was not a game where they were getting blown out early. This was not a game where they got boat raced from the start. They were in it until deep into that third quarter when Justin Herbert ends up throwing a pick 6, right? This was a game that if you play ball control football a little bit, and it's a little bit risky, sure, but your defense is playing incredible. Your defense is keeping you in it, and the defense for Houston is playing incredible as well, right? But you play ball control football. You run the ball a little bit. You give the ball to your best players, guys like J.K. Dobbins, and let him do something with it. That is something that could make a huge difference. Make sure that he gets at least minimum 12 carries in a game, right? Even in a game where the script doesn't work, right? You have enough time to get him the ball, especially early in the game when it looks like you're dominating, up 6-0. The Texans unable to get the ball going. This is not on Justin Herbert. I'm blaming the play calling a little bit more than I'm blaming Justin Herbert, and this is a team that will get better, right? This is a team that way overachieved. They need to get some more weapons. That defense played great. That's sustainable. The offensive line, pretty good. That's sustainable. They need to figure out what they're going to do at the weapons position, at the wide receiver position, because outside of Lad McConkey, they've got just about nothing. That's the big thing for them. The next team that I have a question for, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. They get steamrolled by their division rival, the Baltimore Ravens. And this question everyone's been asking for a while now. What is the plan with Mike Tomlin, right? Is it time for Mike Tomlin to leave? Is it time for the Steelers to fire him? And I have a 2-sided answer for this because we've talked about this a little bit as we've talked about the Steelers this season, because that's some noise that's been coming from fans, right? I think point blank, period, it would be a mistake for the Steelers to fire Mike Tomlin. I think it would be bad for the Steelers to fire Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin is getting the most out of these guys, and what he's getting out of these guys is incredible, right? Consistently making this team a winner, regardless of playoff success, when they go up against just objectively better teams than them. The last time they had a playoff matchup that I thought they could win was before COVID, right? It's a long time ago. They find their way into the playoffs, and sure, they've lost a lot of games in a row. But that's because they're playing teams like the Ravens. They're playing teams like the Chiefs. They're playing teams like the Bills. They're playing these teams that they have no shot in the world against because that roster is just not up to par. This is not Mike Tomlin's fault. I guess you could blame Mike Tomlin because you're not getting those draft picks, but this is mostly on quarterback play. They don't have that true guy that they can rely on. They don't have the real weapons out there, and as good as Russell Wilson played, as good as Justin Fields played this season, you all know that's not the answer. We all know that's not the answer. This is not on Mike Tomlin. This is on their inability to find a successor for Big Ben. He has done an incredible job keeping this team winning. Now, on the flip side of this, I think potentially it would be good for Mike Tomlin if they fired him, because if he so desired, he could go get just about any job he wanted. There are 6 openings right now that the Patriots are gone. The Cowboys are out there. He could go to the Cowboys, and honestly, a legacy of playoff failure for the Cowboys, you bring Mike Tomlin into that room, I think they turn that team around, and I think they win a Super Bowl. Honestly, I really do. Now, I don't think the Steelers are going to fire him, but in the case that they do, I think it would be a blessing in disguise for Mike Tomlin. A coach like that doesn't go on the market every year. You saw the Chiefs pounce on Andy Reid when he got in the market. And it's not a comparison that I thought of that I really thought of. I heard it from Rich Eisen earlier today, mainly because Andy Reid didn't win a Super Bowl and Mike Tomlin did. But what Mike Tomlin is able to do as a successful coach is really unparalleled in the league today. You don't see that ever. And I think you need to have a little bit more, I think we need to see a little bit more out of this team. We need to see a little bit more out of the front office. I think they need to be aggressive trying to trade up for a quarterback. It's not on Mike Tomlin. So what should the Steelers do? They should hold on to Mike Tomlin. They should. Will they? I assume they will. I also don't think it's the end of the world if they let Mike Tomlin go. The Broncos. They are up next here. The Broncos got absolutely blown out by the Bills, and my question for them is this the peak of the Bo Nix Broncos? And I know that's maybe an unfair question to ask for a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix, but I've talked about this with a couple friends. One of the things that really I see shades of in this Bo Nix Broncos team is the 2019 Patriots with Mac Jones, right? They had a Defensive Player of the Year caliber corner, Stephon Gilmore, right? That defense was great. Pat Surtain. You had a rookie quarterback who came in and looked really good, off rip. Bo Nix, obviously. Mac Jones. But you also had a really good defense. And I think when you take a look at these two teams, again, head coaches, legendary head coaches, Sean Payton, Bill Belichick, and I'm not saying it's one for one. The Patriots team after his rookie year completely fell apart, right? Defense fell off a cliff. Bill Belichick kind of was done with coaching at that point, at least in the NFL. He now moves to college football, right? But Mac Jones fell off a cliff there, and I'm worried that we're going to see the same thing with Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos with Bo Nix. And I'm not saying it's going to happen like that. I'm not saying it's going to happen this season. But what I am saying is we take a look at this team now and the way that it's built, it is prone to collapse like the Mac Jones, like the Mac Jones Patriots did, right? I don't know if it's going to happen right away. But once that defense goes, and it eventually will, unless they can keep restocking it, Bo Nix just is not that guy. He's not that player that can really elevate your team, and I just don't see him continuing to be a long-term starter in the NFL. He's going to be fine next season, I think. I don't think they fall apart that quickly, but eventually when they do, that is something, and either way, I don't think this Broncos team gets much better than 11 wins and a playoff appearance, if I'm being completely honest with you. And the final question that I have is for the Packers. And this one, again, is surrounding the quarterback. That's always the big question. But this is not the same question as Bo Nix. It's is this the injury or is this Jordan Love, right? Jordan Love has dealt with a lot this season. He dealt with a bunch of injuries all year long, a knee injury, a hand injury. He played through it all. He did a really good job, honestly, and as the season went on, he was more careful with the ball. But this is a Packers team that has a long line of succession at the quarterback position, right? Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, now to Jordan Love. Right, Jordan Love is supposed to be that next guy, and they've paid him like he is. $55 million contract is insane for a guy that doesn't have a lot of tape on him, right? And he's done a good job. He's been a good quarterback. But when you take a look at the teams that they lost to, aside from that Bears loss, which that's a bad loss, they lost to all the good teams. They lost to the Eagles twice now, right? They lost to the Lions twice. They lost to the Vikings twice. These are all teams that have won more than 10 games, and they just can't compete with those teams that are at the top. Now, in this playoff game, they only lose by 12. And it's not just Jordan Love that was dealing with injury. They obviously lost Christian Watson. They lose Romeo Doubs in the middle of the game. They lose Jaden Reed in the middle of the game. Their top 3 pass catchers are gone. Josh Jacobs is doing good, but in a game where you're being blown out, you need to be able to pass the ball. And the weapons you're having to rely on, Dontavian Wicks, who's fine, but he's not a guy you want to rely on. Bo Melton, not a guy you want to rely on. Tucker Kraft, again, not a guy you want to rely on. They're great secondary, tertiary pieces, but they're not guys that you want to say, you're my guy, go and get it. And I think we're going to blame that for the way that the Packers went down in this game more than anything else. I think really that's what it comes down to. When you're taking a look at the Packers and how they have been built and how they are this season, they are so close to being that great team. And I don't think it's Jordan Love. I think they'll be back. I think they'll be better. I think they will be fine. I think injuries really derailed this season. I'm curious how it goes next season without Christian Watson, because he's going to miss a long time with his injury. But when it comes down to this question, it's not Jordan Love, it's injury, at least in my opinion. Again, let me know what your thoughts are for these 4 questions, for these 4 blowouts. I'll run through them real quick. The Steelers, what do you do with Mike Tomlin? Keep him or let him go? What do you do about Justin Herbert for the Chargers? The Packers, is it injury or is it Jordan Love? And is this the peak for Bo Nix and the Broncos as they currently are? Let me know what your answers are for any of those questions. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the winner's circle. We just went over the losers. There were other teams that came out victorious. We'll talk about that and more coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, January 13th. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the 4 big questions for the 4 teams that got blown out this last weekend. In this segment, we turn our attention to the winners. 4 winners that blew out their opponents. We'll talk about what they did right and what it's like for what we look forward to after they move on in this playoffs. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those 2 things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, January 13th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the winner's circle here the 4 teams that moved on, the 4 teams that looked great. We're going to start off with the Bills here, right? Because the Bills had the biggest blowout in this game, and it was because of Josh Allen, right? You can only do so much against this version of Josh Allen, this MVP level Josh Allen, his athleticism, his ability to extend plays while crucially not getting sacked is incredible. Only 14 sacks taken all year long in the regular season is crazy. Less than a sack per game is not numbers that you usually see, especially out of a guy that extends the play as much as Josh Allen does. Now, it's not just him, it's his arm, right? It's not just his elusiveness, it's his arm, his ability to keep the play alive and hit anybody from anywhere on the field. You have receiving backs like Ty Johnson, and to their credit, the Broncos, I will say, did a very good job against this Bills offense, especially in the first half. But as they just kept getting hit, they couldn't hit back enough, right? And eventually, the straw that broke the camel's back, it was that 4th down play, that 4th and 1 play that we saw Josh Allen and Ty Johnson connect on a ridiculous touchdown throw and catch. A running back is not supposed to be able to make those, but he did. And that was a great play, and that really was what sealed the deal. That was in the middle of a 31-point stretch where the Broncos just did not score a point. They opened up strong. They had a long touchdown pass to Troy Franklin, but after that, they weren't able to get anything going. And a lot of the reason was because the Bills' defense was able to clam up on what their number one weakness has been all season, that being the ability to defend the run. Right? The Broncos don't have the strongest run game. In fact, I'd contend they probably have the weakest run game in the playoffs. But that's how you attack the Broncos, right? That's how you attack the Bills. You've seen when they get hurt, when they give up points. You've seen that when they are vulnerable and when they lose games, they are giving up yards on the ground. And that's what it comes down to. The Broncos and the Bills especially were able to key in on their weakness, and they were able to stop it from really affecting them this season, or this playoff game. And that was one of those things that I really enjoyed seeing about the Bills. Maybe they have a chance against the Ravens if they can stop the run game like that. Now, it's going to be a lot harder against the Ravens, but still, the Bills went out there, they knew what their weaknesses were, they knew what their strengths were, and they played ball control football. They said, Broncos, you're not going to touch the ball. They had the ball for almost 45 minutes of this game. That's crazy. That is great ball control football, and that is how you win games effectively, especially if your offense can drive up and down the field as effectively as the Bills can. Now, for the Texans, they won in a little bit more unorthodox way. Their offense wasn't great. CJ Stroud did his thing. He didn't make as many mistakes as Justin Herbert did, and he did what he needed to do to win the football game. But he's going to need to do more if they want to take down the Chiefs in the next round, right? This is a Texans team that is very strong defensively. Obviously, you have DeMeco Ryans as your head coach, former defensive coordinator from the San Francisco 49ers. He's built a great defense. Coming off the edge, you have Will Anderson, who won Defensive Rookie of the Year last year, pairing him up with Danielle Hunter, who's had a resurgent season. They get pressure on the quarterback. In the secondary, Kamari Lassiter, the rookie, who's been amazing, and first-team All-Pro selection, Pro Bowl, all the accolades going to Derek Stingley Jr., right? These guys, their corners are amazing, right? The linebackers, not perfect, but the secondary and the pass rush is amazing, and that's how they're going to win the games. If they can just play better defense than the other team, that's how you do it. Again, defense wins championships a lot of the time, and that's one of the things that's very, very important. Now, the offense definitely needs some work. Again, it's not a perfect team. It's not a perfect offense, and I don't think anybody is going to sit here and tell you that. But what they were able to do incredibly well against Justin Herbert, a guy who does not make mistakes, was turn him over 4 interceptions. Justin Herbert only had 3 interceptions all season long in the regular season. That is crazy. That is how you win games, and that is how, despite having not a great offensive performance, CJ Stroud and the Texans were able to move on and take on the Chiefs, their second straight season with a playoff win, and a great way to kick off the DeMeco Ryans and CJ Stroud era down there in Houston. Heading over to the bird teams, right? The Eagles up next. They didn't have the biggest blowout, but that's because they didn't have their best game offensively. Again, kind of like the Texans there. That defense is crazy. And that is one of the best defenses. In fact, for my money, that Eagles defense is the best defense in football. Now, losing to Kobe Dean is a big, big blow to the Eagles as they head deeper into the playoffs. But this is an Eagles team that has the guys, has the bodies to replace it. And it sucks. It sucks that he's going to be gone for a while. But a very, very good Eagles team. And I think Jalen Hurts, who was a little bit rusty after missing almost 3 weeks due to concussion, he was out for literally 3 weeks, right? He was still in concussion protocol heading into this week. They didn't need him that much. As long as you have Saquon Barkley to run that offense, as long as you have Saquon Barkley to do what you need Saquon Barkley to do, it is going to be a lot easier. Miles and miles and light years easier to run your offense. I'd like to see them get their big receivers involved more. Obviously, A.J. Brown didn't have his biggest game. You saw Dallas Goedert be physical and absolutely send the Packers packing. He had a big game, but you need to see Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown more involved if you want to take on a more serious contender like they're going to have to do next week when they take on either the Rams or the Vikings, depending on who wins tonight. Right? That is going to be the real key for them. Can they do it like they did this week? Their defense, can it hold up without Nakobe Dean? And can the offense get back to where it is when they were on that huge win streak that they were riding towards the end of the year? And finally, the Ravens, a team that's arguably playing the best football in all of the NFL right now. Lamar Jackson and his deadly duo on the ground with Derrick Henry, they didn't even need an air attack that much. Derrick Henry had more rushing yards than Lamar Jackson had pass yards, and they were able to dominate the Steelers, a Steelers team that has a pretty solid defense. They were able to keep TJ Watt off of the score sheet completely. He did not make a stat at all, period, point blank. No stat made for TJ Watt. That is incredible. That is incredible performance. That's not what you normally see out of TJ Watt, a guy who's known for stepping up in the big games, even if his stats don't necessarily say that he is always the best player out there. He always steps up when they need him to, and that's why he is such an elite player. The Ravens and Lamar, that run, really, we talk about how Derrick Henry is the king and how he's defying time, but coming to the Ravens was an incredible stroke of genius for whoever decided for him to go there, right? With the Titans, he ran for 2,000 yards against 7-8-man boxes, right? But now with Lamar Jackson, his gravity, even on just like a normal run play, when they run that read option, that keep it or give it play, Lamar Jackson holds up 2, maybe even 3 guys. So instead of going up against 8 men in the box, you're now going up against 5 or 6 guys in the box, and 2 extra tacklers not being on Derrick Henry. That makes his life a lot easier because he could deal with 8. Imagine what he can do with 6. This is a Ravens team that's figuring it out, especially defensively. What they have been able to do over the last couple of weeks has been phenomenal. If they can play like this, they are real Super Bowl contenders, and they're my favorites to win it all as we stand right now. Lamar Jackson is doing things special. No one can compare with that. Even Josh Allen, who's also doing very special things that no one can compare with. It's going to be a great game up next between them. But let me know what you think. Who had the best week this week in the NFL? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we finish off our show taking a look at college football. Ohio State advances to the national championship game. A huge moment for them, a huge moment for Ryan Day. We'll talk about all of that and more coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports. Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, January 13th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over the winner circle from Wild Card Weekend, as there's just one more game going on. In this segment, we turn our attention to college football. A national championship game has been set as the Ohio State Buckeyes took care of business against Texas in that Cotton Bowl. We'll talk about that in just a second. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, January 13th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the Ohio State Buckeyes taking on Notre Dame in the national championship game. We will do more breakdowns later on in the week, but talk about how Ohio State takes down Texas. This was a back and forth game, as much as a game like this could have been, right? This was a great game, a great way to round out what was a phenomenal semifinals round, the first really great 4-team playoff that we have seen all college in the history of college football, right? Both of those games were close. All of those teams felt deserving of winning a national title, but at the end of the day, Ohio State, and especially their defense, was able to get it done. Now, I want to give shout out to Texas before we break into everything that Ohio State did great. They did amazing, shutting down Jeremiah Smith. 1 catch for 3 yards, and I know they had a lot of attention dedicated to him. They had like 3 guys bracketing him at all time as zone triangles basically surrounding him, which is crazy work for a guy who is just a freshman in college right now. He is something special. He's going to be a true talent at the NFL wide receiver in the NFL as a wide receiver. That is something that I cannot wait to see, but that's years down the line. What Texas's defense did, holding that Ohio State offense down, what like no other team in the playoff has been able to do so far, including previously undefeated Oregon, was incredible. Right? They deserve all the props for that. That defense played great. And even the offense played pretty solid against a really good Ohio State defense, one that, again, had been shutting down just about everybody all playoffs long. The big play, though, came at the end of this one. Ohio State up by 7, Texas driving. They get down to the 1-yard line. Failure to get in. They run a toss play on 2nd and goal. They don't get in. In fact, they lose a bunch of yards. Then they drop back to pass. Quinn Ewers gets strip sacked, and Jack Sawyer, the senior from Ohio State, picks it up, not just picks up the fumble, but returns it to the house. And I think that is a crucial part of this, right? Because that's the big story, right? A career-defining play, a play that will go down in history if Ohio State wins the national championship. Honestly, even if they don't, that play probably go down in Buckeye history as one of the most amazing plays of all time, sending them to the national championship game for a chance to win their first one since 2014. Right? That is huge. Jack Sawyer's been there for a very long time, but the fact that he takes it back, especially with the way that Texas defense had been playing and the way that Ohio State offense had not really been able to get a lot done, was huge. I cannot overstate how huge that was, because I don't think if he just falls on that ball that Ohio State ends up scoring, and then that game looks a lot different, doesn't it? Right? That game looks a lot more different. We see Texas potentially make a game-tying drive down the stretch. Instead, they lose by double digits. They lose by 14 points, and Ohio State yet again finds their way to the national championship game. Ryan Day has coached his way there, especially after the way it had gone after that loss to Michigan. People were calling for his head. I don't know if that's going to be there any longer. I don't know if it matters if they beat Notre Dame. That's going to be a great game, though. These two teams fought. They recovered from bad losses, and they were able to find their way in to the college football playoff finals. And that's awesome. That's exactly what the 12-team playoff wanted to do. They did it. They succeeded. Teams that lost to NIU, teams that lost to Michigan, and it's really cool. I'm not saying that as a negative. I know some people might take what I just said and spin that into a negative, but it's not. It's a positive. It's something that's that's cool about every other sport that college football doesn't get. And maybe you can say the opposite. I'm not a college football purist. I'm not saying once you mess up once you're done. I think that's unfair. Some people will. I think it's cool that teams and players get another shot. It makes the end of seasons matter more. It makes the playoffs matter more. It makes the bowl games matter just a little bit more. And I'm very excited and I'm very happy with how this 12-team college football playoff has turned out so far. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We will be back tomorrow covering the coaching changes in the NFL. Mike McCarthy, gone. Hired Mike Vrabel. There are still 6 openings left, potentially more coming. We'll cover the playoff game taking place right now and much more. So thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in. We will be back then. Y'all have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.